There are fewer than 30 men in the world qualified to drive Formula One. A mere half dozen, perhaps, to win. At this moment, I'm inclined to think you're not one of them.
No, you want to.
Keep up the good work, Stephen, and there you have it. There you go.
Hello, this is Desiree for F1weekly.com. I'm your in-depth correspondent.
Let's go. With the qualifying, Steve.
Welcome to F1weekly.com. My name is Clark Rogers. I'm the host of the program. I'll be joined by Nasser Hamid, my co-host. This is podcast number 818, February the 3rd, 2020. Nasser?
Thank you, sir. Honda says sayonara to back home again in Indiana for you know who. Back to you, Chief.
Thank you, Nasser. On today's program, Alonso will not be in the Indy 500, and we will all be denied. LCH, yet to sign a new contract. Is there something to read in that? And of course, this week's special interview is with F1 Weekly listener Greg Gutaitis. And of course, we need your contributions to keep this program safely on the air. If you wish to contribute, just go to the F1 Weekly front page and click on Support F1 Weekly tab on the left side. Thanks. And Nasser, welcome to the program. How are you?
Thank you, sir. I heard a rumor that Honda's requested Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to build them a torpedo, and that torpedo has now sunk Nando's boat in the Andretti camp. You know, bad news does not come on doorstep these days. We are living in a digital format delivery. And after Alonso cut his ties with McLaren, who are going with Chevy in IndyCar racing, it was looking an almost certainty that two-time world champion will make another attempt at the Brickyard with Michael Andretti's team. And then I saw the news on Racer.com, which made me think of a song from Chris Rea.
I may not ever. The sins of the past have come. See how they sit down together. Outside my window, outside my door, and I know the reason.
Sins of the past have come. See how they sit down together. Outside my window, outside my door. Apparently, American Honda was interested in giving their Indy Lights engine to Alonso, but the mothership in Tokyo put some wasabi on the idea. So it's back to Mama's paella, unless Mikey can cook him some quick rice-a-roni and put him in a car powered by Chevy. What say you, sir?
It's sad for the racing fans. I mean, Alonso in the Indy 500 is always a good thing for everybody. I mean, it's good for the 500. It's good for Indianapolis. It's good for España. And we shall be denied because some people are not very forgiving and loving. And I understand that. I mean, I always tell people, if you want to hold a grudge, hold it for maybe 10 seconds at the most. Never any longer than that, because life is simply too short. But philosophically, I'm sure I am completely incorrect, as usual, as the host of F1weekly.com. And I'm sure Honda, holding that grudge to their heart, is all wonderful. And, I mean, my thing is, Alonso really doesn't need to be in the Indy 500. It'd be nice for us to see him in the Indy 500. And that's just my take on it. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but that's the way I feel.
Let me tell you how I feel. This may shock you. I agree 100% with everything you have just said. It would be great to see him, but don't lose hope. Honda is not the only engine supplier. Nando may still get to see the USA in his Chevy. And I am hoping, because it is great for him, it is great for Formula One, it is great for IndyCar racing, it's great for everyone. And I am very much hoping that he will be there. I was very surprised, that he is one of the biggest names in motor racing of the last 20 years. Very, very surprised that Penske or Ganassi did not pick him up. Maybe they tried something behind closed doors. I don't know. And I agree with you, grudge you can hold for 10 seconds or maybe 20 seconds, but not forever in the wider. We have much bigger problems in this world than to deny a incredible racing talent an engine that he needs to race. And, I can say a lot of things on this, but we'll keep it short. But, I got to tell you something, man. I very rarely read a book that is not about Formula One or motorsports. But long time ago, I was reading a book, which is more of a very funny take on business and business management. And this was written by two guys who went to Harvard and just got fed up with corporate Americana and then, did their own thing and became successful. But the interesting thing they wrote about that when you're climbing the corporate ladder, be nice to everybody around you. And the next line said, in case you have to come down the ladder, it will be the same faces staring at you. And that's what's happening to Nando. And what really surprised me? Racer is a pretty respectable magazine, so when I saw that, I thought there is some truth in it, and it has now been confirmed. But just before that, there was an interview with F1 Racing magazine, which is another quality publication, and Nando was quoted as saying, and I quote here, it came from a place of, this was about his GP2 comment, and he said, it came from a place of frustration, and maybe I should not say that, but I didn't say it in the TV pen or the press conference. I was talking to my engineer in a private conversation. It was not meant to be public. But the engine was very bad. The first year in Harris, in 4 days we did 7 laps. And I'll just repeat that. In 4 days we did 7 laps. So hook, end of quote. So it's very easy to understand his frustrations. And he went on to say, now when Honda wins, he gets a lot of messages saying GP2 engine has won a race. Must be a sad day for you. I wonder who's sending those text messages. A comment he made that got my attention was, I see mountains and mountains of things I say. Well, when you threaten your team owner in Magyar Republic, some of us will say, ain't no mountain high enough. But even Ron Dennis forgave him, and I could not believe that he would go back to McLaren. So maybe, Honda can have some, Honda executives can have some nice ice green tea mochi ice cream, which I like very much, and maybe reverse their decision. But that's the way it is right now, and I am hopeful that we will see Fernando Alonso at Indy 500, and I really would like to see him there because I'm hoping to attend the great race again this year as I did last year. Back to you, Chief.
Keep up the good work, Nas. So diplomatic, so loving. A class act. That's what we do here at F1 Weekly. But nevertheless, it's true. I believe the saying is blown out of proportion.
Well, Clark, this is not the first time something like that has happened. I mean, there is the famous case of Tommy Byrne having a conversation with Ron Dennis long time ago. And when Ron told him to join McLaren as a test driver as opposed to taking a race seat at Ligier because our R&D budget is bigger than their race budget, and Tommy Byrne asked him, what is R&D? When you are at that level, you have to be very careful. I'll tell you something, I have never been able to verify this, and people involved are not going to answer this question, but I heard when Tracy was let go by Roger Penske, Roger Penske was running his own Indy cars. If you recall, he used to do that. Somebody who had some very good insight into this told me that reason he was let go is Tracy, somewhere during the season, he had won 3 races in a row, and which I remember very well, and was bugging Roger Penske to dish his car and get him a Laura or a Reynard or whatever the flavor of the season was. And if you're telling Ron Dennis or Roger Penske or Chip Ganassi how to run your operation, somebody's going to open the door for you.
Good point, Nasser. Very good point.
It's anyway, so do you have anything else, or shall we? Now we have more late-breaking big news. The other big talking and racing point, Aston Martin back in Formula One, and we are pleased to introduce their new driver, Lance Bond, powered by Pepito's billions and billions. Your take on this, senor?
Fascinating. I thought Aston Martin was part of Red Bull.
Well, they had this agreement to build this Valkyrie car, which they did, but now both parties have announced that this arrangement is coming to an end, and there will be no Aston Martin logos on the Red Bull cars next season. But once again, a consortium led by Lawrence Stroll has bought a big stake. I think it's about 17%, and this time, of course, in Aston Martin. One of his partners is John McCaw. He is from the family that used to own McCaw Cellular, which I'm sure you remember. They were based out of Seattle area. And this company was sold to AT&T for billions and billions. Going back to Aston Martin, they ran out of money. And I love when companies do this. They ran out of money after building a factory in Wales where they will produce their SUV. Can you imagine an SUV? Heck, Porsche has a SUV, Lamborghini has a SUV, so why not Aston Martin? I can't wait to see Lance and Justin Bieber come to the Monaco Grand Prix in an Aston Martin SUV, provided, of course, Bieber is not arriving in Monte Carlo in a magenta Mercedes AMG, driven by his other F1 friend. And I saw a comment, this story was on Bloomberg.com, and there was a comment for what I would call from the peanut gallery. And this person wrote, "The only one who is not a troll in the Stroll family is the family figurehead. In a digital world, slings and arrows from every which way. Kick him when they're up, kick him when they're down." Do you think Lance Stroll can bail out Aston Martin, the company?
No. And all we have to do is, instead of a company, let's look at something even larger, like a government. And governments have lots of problems, and when they throw money at the problem, it's very, very seldom that a solution has popped up. So I think it's great. I mean, it saved jobs. It sounds good. I even like saying Aston Martin. It feels good. But let me put it this way. Let me bring you some local news at the local level here in Northern California. A very good friend of mine works at the Aston Martin dealership, which is just a couple miles from my house. And let me put it this way. No money down, no credit check will get you in a Aston Martin these days because they can't give them away.
Yeah, one thing that I've never understood is how these companies can spend, in this case, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars when they are not even making money, when they are not even increasing their sales. They go out, Aston Martin went public. That obviously did not bring them a lot of money. At one time, Dave Richards of ProDrive was involved, and there was some Middle Eastern investors. They may still be involved. It's like, do you remember when General Motors started Saturn Car Company? That took a lot of, billions of dollars, and it ran for a few years, and next thing you know, they're shutting down the whole operation. So it's a tough environment when you're trying to sell anything, so much competition. A company not making money is going to have a Formula One team. But, Lawrence Stroll obviously has very, very deep pockets, as deep as the Mariana Trenches. So maybe he can make something happen. Heck, he can buy a car, maybe 6 months of production and just give them away to his cronies in Canada and worldwide. Anything else, sir, that got your attention this past week that we can talk about today?
No, not really, except that it's cold.
Yes. Now, Seb in his seat. Last Friday, Sebastian Vettel was in Maranello for seat fitting on his 2020 F1 machinery. Like Bottas, this season could be his last opportunity to win the championship with Ferrari. At least he has 4 from his previous ride at Red Bull. And speaking of Red Bull, Seb was also seen past week at their annual ski party in Austria. So he has remained on, well, let's put it this way. Nice to know that he has not burned bridges at Red Bull. But Dr. Marco, I think I just saw it today on the news, that he has made a statement that Seb is not coming back to Red Bull. I think Seb will probably stay another year or two at Ferrari and then auf Wiedersehen to Formula One.
I completely agree. I mean, it's his last chance, but it's not much of a chance. You forgot to mention Mercedes and LCH.
Yeah, and also his own teammate. There's trouble in paradise and in the Italian paradise, so that's going to be an issue. And then I think the whole thing about the 2020 season really depends on if Honda can give Max a little more oomph, and that if they can give him a car that is as competitive as the Mercedes in power-wise, then he will make Lewis's life miserable. And of course, Lewis will do the same, but it will be a serious bloodbath, and I cannot wait to see cage rattling between an old man and a what you call a whippersnapper. Because, I would love to see the youngest world champion in Max Verstappen in my lifetime. And I think this is his last year to be the youngest world champion. So a lot at stake in Formula One this year.
Exciting, Nasser. Exciting.
The Miami Grand Prix track has gone from one opposition to another change to more opposition. Man, I'm just hoping if it does not work out there, I personally, just a personal opinion, do not want to see a Formula One race in Las Vegas. But with Roger Penske taking over the Indy track and the series, I would love to see Formula One go back to Indianapolis. And I know Roger Penske is not listening to F1 Weekly, but man, if you do so, I'll be there every year.
Yeah, good luck with that, Nas. Keep up the good work, and I think we have a nice, interesting interview coming up.
Yes, sir. This is with one of our original listeners. We have a, gang of 50, I would say, people who started listening even before I joined the, craziness that goes on here. And Mr. Greg Gooditis is one of them, and my thanks to him for sending me a message before the Daytona 24 hours that he was coming there. And this was our first meeting just as the race started, and hopefully our paths will cross again at some other track across the USA. And I hope other family members of F1 Weekly enjoyed this chit-chat recorded at Daytona a few weeks ago. Thank you. Okay, folks, Daytona 24 is on, as you can hear. And I'm here with one of our earliest listeners, Mr. Greg Gooditis. Greg, great to meet you. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, very well.
First time at Daytona?
Second time. Last year was our first, and it's an annual event for me to come to. It's intoxicating to be here amongst all these cars.
Who do you think will win the race this year?
I don't know. Last year it was so close, and Alonso, the Motorola team, just drove right by the guys that were in the lead. I didn't think they were going to win, but they sure did. So anything can happen, really.
Any favorites in terms of a team or a car or a driver in this race?
I don't have a favorite team. I'm just here to watch the racing, really. I get the most enjoyment out of just being at the track, hearing the noise, smelling the smells, engaging and talking with the drivers and the race fans around the track.
Okay, now, what part of US are you from and where are you based these days? And the next question is, how did you discover motor racing and F1 Weekly? So take your time, no rush.
Okay. So I grew up in Binghamton, New York. Went to Syracuse University. Graduated from there and ended up moving to a small town in Ohio. And moved around a bit there, and anyway, landed in a small town near South Bend, Indiana. Started following racing from a very young age. Really got into Formula One in the late 90s. It drew me in with the technology and just the history, and I just found it very fascinating. And it just evolved from there, really.
You grew up very close to Watkins Glen. Did you ever go to races there?
Never been to Watkins Glen. Or I shouldn't say I've never been there. I've never been there for a race. Been up through there. It's a gorgeous part of the country. Didn't realize the history of that circuit until I started getting more heavily into Formula One, reading books by drivers such as Stewart and Lauda, and just hearing them talk about this track. It's kind of I took it for granted for what it was, and now that I know, I don't get much time to go back there and actually see it for what it is.
Talking of these books that you have read, what have you read lately, or among the books you have read? Tell us some interesting stories or things that got your attention.
So I haven't read any books lately. I have two young kids that occupy most of my time now, but one of the really interesting books I read is the autobiography from Niki Lauda, where he talks about just all these famous scenarios and times of racing. Just I can't think of a specific example at the moment. It's just so interesting, the whole part of it, and hearing Jackie Stewart talk about racing with Francois Sever and the accident that happened at I believe it was the '73 Watkins Glen race. It just brings all this stuff to real life to me. So,
how and when did you discover F1 Weekly?
F1 Weekly. So, in 2006, started hearing about podcasts, and it was kind of the new thing at the time. I thought, well, heck, I might as well see if there's an F1 podcast out there. And came across your podcast and listened to it very regularly for a couple years. And I honestly I don't know why I stopped listening, just did. I think life maybe caught up to me. I met a girl who became my wife, so I got distracted, let's say. But really, that podcast is the reason that I'm sitting here talking to you today. So
finally, you met somebody more charming than Clark Rogers.
I guess I did, yeah.
Good for you. Okay, now, as far as Formula One is concerned, a lot of changes in the hybrid era. I miss the sound. What say you?
I miss it as well. I miss the cram as much horsepower into the back of it as loud as you can possibly make it. I definitely can respect the hybrid and the technology and the turbo technology, but there's still nothing like a V12 engine.
Now, looking back to the 2019 season, the performance of Charles Leclerc versus his teammate Sebastian Vettel, were you surprised?
I was very intrigued by that because the first F1, actually the only F1 race I've attended was the U.S. Grand Prix at Indianapolis. And I remember seeing young Sebastian Vettel there sitting in for Kubica, who got into the major accident up in Canada. And I never realized at that time what he would become. But it's really interesting to see some chinks in the armor, maybe. It's I think that brings good racing, that competition of the younger guys taking the place of the older guys. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in 2020 for sure.
Okay, season opener last year, Australia. A lot of hype about Bottas 2.0. Did you buy into that hype?
I didn't hear your question. I apologize.
After Bottas won the first race of the season last year, there was a lot of hype of Bottas 2.0.
I was hoping, I read several articles about him and really intensifying his training to take it to Lewis Hamilton. And I thought, you always kind of root for that underdog, that number 2 driver. And I was hoping like heck that he would be able to carry it through. But Lewis Hamilton is just he's a big deal. He's a big deal, for sure.
Max Verstappen, do you think he can dethrone Lewis this year?
There's part of me that says, yes, I wish he would for the racing. I'm not a huge Verstappen fan, though. I just am not. There's something, he's very aggressive. He's very unclean, in my opinion. If I was a driver, I would stay away from him. I think a lot of them do. I wish him all the best, obviously. It's just, I would rather Hamilton win if I had to pick.
Among the rookies, who impressed you more? Lando Norris, Alexander Albon, or George Russell?
In terms of rookies, I don't know that any one of them stood out to me. I didn't follow them as much as I did the bigger names. So I don't have a good answer for you.
What's your take for this season? Do you think the Mercedes steamroller will continue?
It would be nice to see a change, just to get a more intense competition. But I am one that I respect the history of it. So if Lewis, of the whole sport, and so Lewis Hamilton, obviously getting a 7th World Championship is going to be a big deal. The records that he's already smashed are something that, we're watching history be in the making. Would I like to see somebody else take it to him this year? I would say, yeah. Make him wait a little bit longer. It makes for better racing.
Okay, earlier you mentioned the U.S. Grand Prix at Indy. The track and series now bought out by Roger Penske. Your thoughts on that?
I would love to see another U.S. Grand Prix there. I think that the George family overall, I think they acted a bit. It's just unfortunate that another race was not held there. I hope that Penske has enough clout to maybe bring it back. I'd like to see multiple races in America. I guess time will tell for sure to see what happens.
Now, Chase Carey is trying very hard for a race in Miami. They have one change of venue, then change of layout. Do you think it will happen?
Miami, that would be pretty awesome. A street circuit. I hope it does. For all of us fans, I hope it does.
You've been to the Austin track. What do you think about that track?
I have actually not been to the Austin track. Unfortunately, I just have never made it down there. We've talked about it. My wife and I have talked about it. Just a matter of time at this point.
If I may ask, are you planning to attend other races this season?
Maybe not so much this season. Again, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is an annual event for me. With young kids right now, I'd like to really build that interest with them to keep this going. And so in a couple years, I could see myself attending a lot more, another Indy 500, just because it's so close to where I live. But really, F1 and endurance racing, to me, are I can appreciate circle track racing for what it is, but there's nothing like a good road race.
You're wearing a beautiful blue golf cap, which tells me, and as you saw, some people even stopped and asked you about it, that you're a serious racing fan. Are there other series you follow regularly, or other drivers that you are like sort of following?
Not so much. I'm just a fan of I guess the history of it, and all the people like yourself. We stood and talked for probably 45 minutes solid about different stories, and it's events like this, you just become part of it. And I have an uncle who I'm very close to that worked for golf back in the 70s, and I just I don't know, it always stuck with me. I hate to say it because I like the color scheme, but it's definitely part of it. There's a lot that it's just, there's so much history with Gulf Oil and racing. You can't help not but think of Steve McQueen racing in Le Mans, and the famous Ford GT cars painted in the color scheme.
Last year here you had a brief encounter with the two-legged Rubinho. Tell us about that.
So we were walking down, talking to drivers, meeting people, and I happened to look to my right, and there was a guy standing there that looked very familiar to me. And as I looked, it dawned on me that it was Rubens Barrichello. So I tell my brother-in-law, I'm like, that's Rubens Barrichello. He's the most experienced Formula One driver in the world. I need to go over and talk to him. And so I go over and I just make small talk with him, and I, at the time, was wearing a Ferrari hat. And I know that his relationship with Ferrari and the Schumacher, the Michael Schumacher, were not the best. And so I had nothing else for him to sign, and so I asked him if he would mind signing my Ferrari hat, understanding that, it's a Ferrari hat. And he just kind of laughed and said, "It'll be okay, I'll sign your hat for you." And so it was, we just had a nice small talk chat, but very, very nice individual for sure.
Now, you talked about a very interesting encounter you had with people who were involved with the AMC Javelin Racing project some years ago. Will you tell our listeners about that, please?
Certainly. So, my dad is a very avid Studebaker collector, and so that's a very niche collector. And when I met my wife, I found out that her dad was an AMC collector. Again, another niche manufacturer. And we went to an annual meet in Auburn, Indiana, with AMC collectors. And we were listening to some speakers, eating our dinner, and we ended up just going out and just getting some fresh air. And we happened to see these two older gentlemen standing at a table talking, and so we just started small talk with them. We found out that they were the guys that were actually speaking in the room. We were sitting so far back we didn't realize who they were. So we didn't recognize them. Well, it turns out one of them was the head of the motorsports program in the 70s and actually was in charge of the team that Mark Donohue raced for in the AMC Javelin. And just hearing him talk about different things of that time period, and having at the time Roger Penske was a major player in the AMC program, and so he was telling stories of Roger Penske calling him in the middle of the night with these ideas that he had to put on the car so that they could, race the next day. And it was just one of those times where you just fall into a scenario, a different situation where you're talking to somebody that played a key role in racing history, and just by happenstance you're the guy talking to him. So just a very interesting individual. He was responsible for the car that actually was in the James Bond movie, and I shame on me for not remembering what kind of car. I don't know if it was a Matador. I'll say it was a Matador, but he was laying in bed early one morning again, and he gets this call from Francis Broccoli in England asking if AMC would mind loaning them a car or selling them a car to use for the movie. And so that was history right there in the making, because that movie is a timeless, and of course I don't remember the James Bond movie, but remember the scene for sure over the canal.
Very impressive. One last question, and you can only just take one name. Who will be 2020 world champion?
It's a tough one. I don't want to give you.
Who would you like to see become world champion?
I would like to see Charles Leclerc do it. I really think that somebody new that has only been around for a while, I hate to say, or I don't hate to say because of the history aspect, but Hamilton's a force to be reckoned with for sure. For sure.
Great meeting you. Thanks a lot.
Great meeting you. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Greg, thanks for joining F1weekly.com. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be back after these brief messages.
Hi, I'm David Coulthard, otherwise known as DC, and you're listening to F1 Weekly.
Welcome back to F1weekly.com. Clark Rogers here, your host. And now, as we spin the globe and go around the world with Motorsports Mondial and the king, the Swami, the guru himself, Nasser Hamid.
Thank you, sir. I say greetings and racing regards from the ANZ or the ANZ Corps. We're going to start with motorsports, land down under, Bathurst 12 hours at the Mount Panorama Circuit near Sydney. The race was won by a Bentley Continental driven by Jules Gounon, son of racer Jean-Marc Gounon, South African Jordan Pepper. His sister Tasman is also a racer, and Belgian teammate Maxime Soule. And I'm sure most of our listeners know that Bentley is owned by the VW Group. Second was a McLaren driven by Ben Barnicoat, Tom Blomqvist, son of World Rally champion Stig, and Alvaro Parent of Portugalistan, who at one time was looking good. He was British F3 champion, came into F2, but things did not work out for him to come into Formula One. But a pretty good racing driver, that's for sure. Now we move over the water to New Zealand, Toyota Racing Series from Hampton Downs. The past weekend was a Latin sweep. 2 of the 3 races were won by Brazilian Igor Fraga. He's of Japanese descent. Race 2 of the weekend was won by young Argentine driver Franco Colapinto. And all these races can be watched live free of charge on motorsport.tv, and sometimes they're also available on YouTube. Local lad and defending champion Liam Lawson was second in race 2 and 3 after a DNF in the opening race of the weekend. The 2 wins by Fraga has put him in the championship lead over Lawson. Very impressive, I must say. Fraga has 219 points compared to 202 for Liam Lawson, and I think Liam Lawson is a very good talent. I will not be surprised if he makes it to Formula One courtesy of Red Bull. Now this is, talking of Red Bull, typical way of doing things. We have a new Red Bull rooster. 14-year-old American Jake Crawford has been added to Dr. Marco's Men of Baton March. Thanks to his young age, Jake could not be fed to the Sharks in Formula Renault or European F3 in his first season in Europe. He will race in both the Italian and German F4, a common practice among youths. I don't know why when they take young Americans at this age, they took some years ago this kid called Neil Verhagen. I have no idea why they don't put him in American series like, US Formula 4 and also the US 2000. It's a question for Dr. Marco if and ever I get to sit down and chat with him. Okay, sir, FIA goes chop on the Chinese Formula E race. It was set for March 21st and now postponed due to harem-scarum coronavirus situation going on there. The Chinese F1 Grand Prix is set for April 19th, and according to an FIA update, they are prepared to take action over the running of the Chinese Grand Prix this year. Unfortunately, over 300 people have died in China so far from the outbreak, so I just hope things get under control ASAP. Do you think the Chinese Grand Prix will go ahead, sir? I agree with you. It's getting too close, and these things, they just don't disappear. There's always after effects and things like that, and last thing we want to see is a sick Lewis Hamilton going for his 7th World Championship. That, I'm sure, will really hurt your feelings. Tony Kanaan going out in circles. TK, friends with two-legged Rubinho since they were kids, has announced he will retire at the end of this season. He will race with AJ Foyt's team and will only do ovals. Highlight of his career was victory in the 2013 Indy 500. He is the Rubinho of IndyCar racing with more starts, 377, than any other driver except Mario Andretti. Very, very impressive, I must say. We wish TK all the best, and we did interview him, and he was very nice and cooperative some years ago. He is only 45 years old, which is right time to be a rookie in NASCAR. And as we have seen, at that age, he can make his mark there, just as Mr. Martin. Now, some interesting driver signing news that came out today. You remember Alessandro Nannini, right? That name is heading back, hopefully, to Formula Uno. Matteo Nannini will drive for Swiss team Yenzer Racing in this year's Formula 3 championship. He is nephew of Alessandro Nannini, a one-hit wonder of Formula 1, courtesy of race winner of the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix, getting disqualified by Jean-Marie Balest. More girl power. Miss Rima Jufali from Saudi Arabia has signed with Double R team to continue her campaign in British F4, and Double R, one of the R is for Kimi Raikkonen, believe it or not. Rima's nation has a lot of oil, which means it is only a matter of time before she is signed as a development driver for Williams. Oh, Claire. Now, some fun stuff. Fun to the max. A documentary will be released next month at the Manchester Film Festival, detailing the life and times of Max Mosley, and he says it will be about warts and all. So I definitely will go and check it out because there's a lot of history there. As I'm sure a lot of our listeners know, he was making his F1 debut in the race Jim Clark was killed in Formula 2 at Hockenheim, and then did a lot of things. Now we come to famous last words. Today they come from Lewis Carl Hamilton. You know, there are reports that maybe Kimi will retire at the end of the season, and this is what Lewis had to say, and I quote, "I may need to start paying Kimi to stay so I'm not the oldest," end of quote. What say you, Mr. Rogers, the young whippersnapper of podcasting?
Everybody's getting older, young whippersnappers coming in. I think as LCH gets older, he wants to make a point. And then there's the point, people are talking about Fernando coming back in 2021, which will not happen. It's just chit-chat because everybody loves to talk about Fernando and exploit his bad karma. So, no, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens with Kimi's situation, and not just with Kimi's situation, but with Alfa Romeo, and then again, a very historical, mythical name in motor racing. But as a company, I don't think they're making much money, if any at all. And I just do not see this name, as much as I would love to see this name stay, but I don't see them staying. I'll be shocked if they are in Formula 1 when the new regulations come into play. Let's put it that way. Do you see any hope of your fellow Francais team, Renault, doing something this year?
No, nothing.
Yeah, me too, unfortunately. I don't think that's going to get into a situation of race wins. Maybe a podium or two, and that will be more to the racecraft of Daniel Ricciardo than Renault's pace.
Yeah, I feel bad for Daniel Ricciardo, to be honest with you. Let me put it this way. His career is over.
I think, unfortunately, his championship is gone. You know, had he stayed at Red Bull, if Max won 3 races, I don't see any reason why he could not have won 2 or 3 himself. Yeah, so his bad move on his part. He has done the reverse of what Lewis did when he went from McLaren to Mercedes. Any predictions on the upcoming, soon-to-be happening F1 testing?
Yes, Ferrari will look extremely strong.
Yes, and then what will happen in the park? The red colors will fade away, huh?
It's absolutely hilarious. No, it's 2019, deja vu all over again.
I would love to see Daniel Ricciardo at least get on the podium in Australia.
Yes, so would his mom.
Yeah, no, that would be good for the sport, for local fans and all that. And these things are good, you know. Remember, who was it who was on the podium? Sato made it to the podium, or was it Kobayashi? Sato, right?
I thought it was Sato. Came in 4th, yes.
Yeah, so these things are good when they happen. Can you imagine the the excitement people will have in Montreal if Lance Stroll makes it on the podium in the Canadian Grand Prix?
Well, Lance Stroll has been on the podium at every race, according to his father's dreams.
Yeah, I think every Canadian will say, oh man, I'm so glad he's one of us.
What's good about Lance Stroll and the Papa is he's keeping jobs and keeping a company afloat. The money is just a waste of time if you don't invest it. I'm happy for him.
Like they say, Papa was a rolling stone. In this case, Bambino is a rolling stone, rolling from one Grand Prix to another. And now he will be joined by fellow Trustafarian, Nicholas Latifi, and that will be interesting too.
Yeah. They could exchange money clips.
And both have experience of working with Williams and Claire. Boy, beautiful.
Cars are coming out in a couple of weeks. Are you pumped up?
I am very, very excited. And I believe last year that Sky Network did hopefully they will have some video of this on the Formula One website. And so I cannot wait to see Formula One cars moving. And I used to love their sound, but that unfortunately is gone. So we just have to, like you said, like Lawrence Stroll, dream of the sound and enjoy what is left of Formula One.
Exactly. So hopefully the next podcast we will have news and updates, 2020 F1 cars and their drivers. It's exciting. And hopefully Fernando, maybe Fernando should fly out to Tokyo and make amends, Can't we all just hug and get along?
Yeah, I think that would be nice. That will be very nice.
Yes, maybe I should go along and be like an in-between.
No, I have an idea. Because of the gentleman has experience in doing business in Japan, maybe he can hire Carlos Ghosn as his agent provocateur.
That's a very good idea. I think Carlos Ghosn and Danny Thomas.
Yes. And instead of going back to Tokyo in a musical box, they can invite Honda executives to Beirut. And I love Lebanese food. And they can have some Lebanese food and couscous. And then, make it up.
Yes, they can make it up. And then they can shake it up.
Yeah, but like I said, there are Chevy Power teams also, so it's not the end of the world for Fernando Alonso. And Michael Andretti has a lot of contacts and a lot of resources. He can always, as they do in these situations, start a satellite team and provide the expertise and, under a different name, under a different umbrella, run Nando with Chevrolet engines. It can happen, and I hope it does.
Everybody right now is in a mood to undercut Fernando. They just don't want him. And if I was Fernando, I would just leave the limelight, go home, and cook.
But you have to really, it's not that nobody likes him. Toyota gave him a ride, almost a guaranteed win at Le Mans, which he did. Then they helped him with the Dakar Rally. But as fans, we are so frustrated that he cannot get into a good ride. I don't think he will admit that he's frustrated or he's, feeling bad about it. But it has to get to him, And, guys who are driving in GP2 for 4 or 5 years, I don't know why I mentioned GP2 again, but, guys who are racing in that series for 4 or 5 years are in Formula One. And the man who dethroned Michael Schumacher, he cannot find a competitive ride. Something is very, very wrong with this picture, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the system and the people. And the boat is about to leave the dock and we'll never get to see it happen again. So it's done. I've accepted it. I hope Fernando does. And let's move on and give LCH more trophies.
Yeah, just think of it. Just look at the implication of this idea. If Red Bull puts him next to Max Verstappen, what a explosion of nuclear news it will be in motor racing that Fernando Alonso is teammate to Max Verstappen. That will bring crowd and that will bring the numbers that Liberty Media and Mr. Carey is chasing.
It would triple viewership. People would be freaking out. And that's why it won't happen.
Let me tell you, in what was it, in 1993, when our Nige came to IndyCar racing, and in those days I used to go to Laguna Seca for the Monterey Historic and for the sports cars, and of course towards the end of the year for the IndyCar race. Man, I'll tell you, the year he was there, the crowd, you could just see how big the crowd was there, because big names attract big crowds. There is no question about it.
It would be unbelievable, but unfortunately, a lot of people don't want that to happen. They like the status quo.
Yes, but stars come and go, and new one keep rising. And I'm expecting, and I'm hoping, and I want Lando Norris to step up the game and rattle Carlos Sainz's cage, who is a very nice kid and a very good driver. But we want to see some, hey, get out of the way. Kind of like Brazil last year between Seb and Charles Leclerc. Nobody wants to be behind his teammate regardless of the cost. Sad, but that's just racing reality.
Yeah, I agree with you. Nas, keep up the good work. I'm done here. You're done here. I want to thank all the listeners who listen. Good night.
And just one last thing. Next week, podcast will have an interview with Pedro Lamy. Obrigado for listening. Thank you.